How's everybody today? Jason said I needed some money. I got into TV. That was a really dumb move on my behalf. If I was looking for money, I definitely got in the wrong business. So we got a good crowd here today. I want to thank Jason for having me back and Texas A&M University for having me back. It's kind of somewhat unusual, I guess, to have Colorado TV guy come down and speak to you guys, but we hooked up a long time ago, and I love coming down here every year to speak to you guys. So my goal, if you haven't seen me speak before, is to, if nothing else, show you some things that maybe you haven't seen before in terms of weather forecasting, and do my best to try to convince you all that despite the fact that you think that I don't know what the hell's going to happen in the next 30 minutes, let alone the next 6 months, that I can show you a little bit of evidence otherwise. And for those of you that do follow me, I don't want to pat myself on the back a little bit, but track record's been okay. Am I wrong? I think track record's been all right. So I hope I've been able through the years to be able to show you that there is something to this seasonal forecasting, and even if we don't get it right all the time, right down to the letter, I'll be honest with you, I'm not trying to do that because it's virtually impossible when you're talking about seasonal like patterns and this type of weather forecast. So I'm not trying to run the bases with this. I'm just simply trying to get in the ballpark and give you something that you can put in your risk management toolbox to help your outfit run a little bit smoother, and at the end of the day make a little bit more money, because there's nothing wrong with that. So let's get started here, and what you're looking at is total rainfall plus or minus inches above normal. And I say I've got normal up there in quotation marks, and for those of you that follow me know that I really don't subscribe to the word normal, but that's what you hear most of the time. And normal is basically way too much plus way too little divided by 2. That gets a number that you never get anyway. So that's what normal is. So I prefer the word average, but whatever you want to say, it's a horse apiece, I guess. But the takeaway from the map is it's been soggy the last couple months. Has that been good for you guys? I think so. Certainly better than the alternative. We all know what that's like. But during the past 60 days, there have been some pockets around the state that have been a little bit drier than average here and there. But the one thing that I am really excited about, I guess, is the fact that this brown stuff isn't nearly as large as all this green and blue stuff. And that's certainly been good news for us. So that's the last 60 days. That's the last 30 days. But you know what? I don't care, because it's July and August in Texas. It's supposed to be hot and dry. So is this really out of the normal? No, it's not. But you guys have gotten so spoiled because it's been so wet around here. I've heard an awful lot of squawking around today about how dry it is. And I'm kind of like, just calm down, because it's supposed to be hot and dry right now. But when you go from having all that moisture to something like this, it's a little bit of a change, obviously. And some of this stuff, when you come off the heels of something that's been that wet, it's very flashy in nature. It's a term I like to call it, just flash drought, if you will. Nothing terribly significant to support what's going on, but it's a big turn, and it's a seasonal turn, and it's about what you should expect. So while it's been dry, this is definitely not the sign of something that is big, terrible, awful, and nasty, at least the way I see it right now. It's just something we've just been coming to used to. So I really don't like the drought monitor because it doesn't necessarily tell the entire story. So I want to show you a couple maps here that are kind of part of what goes into making the drought monitor, and this is essentially short-term drought indications here. So you know the drill. Where it's green and blue, that's good, and where it's yellow, brown, and red, that's bad. And short-term drought indicators are basically over the past several days to a couple of months. So a lot of the fact that this is neither brown or green or blue goes into how wet it was during the spring months here. Obviously the last 30 days is a little different story, but so far so good. Some dryness out here in West Texas, and obviously here in parts of New Mexico and Arizona where the monsoon has basically been a failure until about the past week and a half or so. We got started late, about 3-4 weeks late out that way. But for the most part, most of the country's in pretty good shape. And if you go into the long-term drought indicator, which is basically over the past several months to even couple years, boy, that whole perma-drought thing that was talked about back in 2011, done a whole lot of water, no pun intended. Put all the water here. Very wet stuff up to the nation's midsection. Our ranch and farm, my folks, I shouldn't say ours because I really didn't help out a whole lot this year. I got a 6-month-old baby girl and she's about all the work I want to get accomplished right now. But our family ranch and farm is about right there. We cut 75 bushel dryland wheat this year. 75 bushel. That beat our field's all-time record by 20 bushel to the acre. So pretty impressive stuff, not only with the amount of rain that we saw, but also the timeliness, which when you're farming in the desert, it's all about timing. And boy, did we get some good timing this year. So to put this in perspective, the first 6 months of this year were the wettest all-time on record for the United States, lower 48. Did you guys hear about that? Nope. Got to dig pretty hard to hear that kind of stuff. That's good news for the most part. I mean, the flooding is tough to take at times, but I'd rather have a little too much water than not enough if you're in agriculture, and I'm sure you're probably the same way. So I want to give you a little bit of an appetizer here for the next 14 days. This is basically dryness, where you're seeing the brown, and this is where the rain is going to be falling, which in the summer in Texas, high pressure sets up about right there, and we don't see a whole lot of water unless something comes in from the Gulf. However, I've heard some people saying, yeah, it's so dry, blah, 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 but I left Denver this morning at 5 a.m. We touched down in College Station about 9:50 or so today. I saw clouds outside. Clouds in the morning, if you're in a big drought, that doesn't happen. There was some rain around yesterday in parts, not a lot, but some. That kind of stuff doesn't happen if you're a big nasty drought. Someone said today, I haven't even had 100 degrees this year. Well, the wetter the ground, the harder it is to heat up, and that saves you a little bit of heat during the summertime too. So all things considered, while the short-term stuff really hasn't been a whole lot to write home about in terms of moisture, nor will the next couple of weeks, which we're actually going to get pretty hot here, so that'll make you squawk a little more, things are pretty good. And even areas up here to the north, monsoonal moisture will probably start to kick in a little bit, and we'll see what that can do. The wettest stuff's going to be right up here in eastern Kansas. They're going to be tired of water in about the next month. Let's look at the sea surface temperature anomalies over, let's grab this just yesterday, and a couple of regions that I want you to look on. Where you're seeing green and blue, that's where ocean water is cooler than average. Where you're seeing the reds, that's where it's warmer than average. So right out here, we had a little El Nino episode last winter and last spring. All this was warmer than average water right here. Well, we've cooled things off quite a bit. We still got pockets of warm water out here. We're basically the ENSO region here, where we look for El Nino or La Nina episodes, is basically La Nada at this point, okay? It's in neutral. So, not a huge player at this point. I'll bring that back here in just a second, but I still have my eye on this little bit of warm water out here. But I really have my eye on this business up here. That's a lot of warmer than average water up there in the Gulf of Alaska. And this time of year, you look for these types of indicators in the sea surface temperatures to give you a better idea of what's going to happen going forward with the overall weather pattern. And I think this is going to be a pretty significant player in what happens in the forecast over the next 6 to 7 months or so, which I'll show you here in just a little bit. I also want to show you what's going on beneath the surface. So this goes back, let's rack it up again here. I think it was late May 28th. So what you're looking at here while this goes, this is the ocean depth right here, 0 to 450 meters deep. This is the western Pacific over here on the left. This is the eastern Pacific over here on the right. So down here, when we started this, we had warm water right there. That was a little mini El Nino that was going on. It faded, and then it kind of reinvigorated here. Not necessarily in an El Nino sense, but at least some warmer than average water out there. The one thing that's interesting is the cooler than average water right here and right here. This is something I'm always watching. I'm not just watching the surface. I'm watching what's going on beneath, because what's going on beneath will often tell you what's going to happen up top in a pretty short period of time. And if this was all blue across here, I would be significantly concerned about the possibility of a La Nina episode developing. And La Nina is rarely good for the state of Texas when it comes in terms of moisture, especially the western 2/3 of the state. So I don't see that happening at this time, which is a good thing. State of the Pacific out here is still in pretty good shape, but I want to give you a little bit of a look at that. This garbage to look at right here is essentially this one particular model, which I absolutely am in love with and have been in love with for several years, the Euro model. It's the ENSO plume. So basically several different runs of this model looking at whether or not we could have an El Nino, La Nina, or keep it in neutral. And you can see that there are more red lines above the 0 line here than there are below it, and that's a good trend. They're kind of spread out though quite a bit, which gives me an idea that the model doesn't have it all together at this point, which I think it'll get more dialed in here within about the next month or so about what's going to happen. But in terms of the trend is your friend. And as long as we have more red lines above 0 than below down here in La Nina territory, I'll take that. Basically what the model is saying is we're kind of in neutral right now, and the ocean currently supports that. This other model, the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, looking at the same thing. It favors mainly neutral Lanotic conditions. That dotted line right there is essentially the mean of what these models are forecasting. Now, that being said, you might be saying, whoa, there's a whole lot more lines down here on this one than there was the other. Well, it's because of one particular model. I want to draw that one right here. That one. That's a good old United States of America model. It sucks. We are vastly inferior to the European modelers at this time in our country when it comes to weather forecasting. And that is the main long-range forecast model for the United States that they use. You see a lot of that shade of line down here below 0. It is forecasting a La Nina episode. Now, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Is it possible it could be right? Maybe. I'm not buying it though, because of what I showed you just a little bit ago with the way the ocean is positioned right now. I'm always watching that. I will certainly admit if I'm wrong if that happens. But right now, I don't see that happening. I think most of where we want to be is up here around the 0 line and maybe just north of 0 just a little bit. So for the time being, I'm discounting that particular model for right now. We'll revisit that in another couple of months if it still looks kind of nasty. The ENSO plumes versus all these other models over here. Again, all of these are models looking at the same thing. All of these different models do the same thing. They keep it basically in neutral to maybe even slightly warmer than average right there. So nothing that is screaming at me, La Nina is headed our way. I don't see that right now. All right, so a little bit of science here, because I know you guys in agriculture love to play meteorologist and tell us that you're better than we are, right? Farmers and ranchers are some of the best meteorologists in the world because they rely on it. So what I wanted to share with you a little bit is a deep dive here into kind of some of the things that I look at. And what you're looking at here is the upper level weather pattern as this particular model sees it over the next several months. So we're starting with August. Now where you're seeing the reds, that's where you've got a big ridge of high pressure. We've got a couple, Gulf of Alaska, right where that warmer than average pool of water was, right, that I showed you. And we've got one down here over the southern and southwest part of the United States where it historically should be positioned this time of year. The blues, troughs of low pressure, think of it as cooler relatively speaking, possibly stormier relatively speaking. So big ridge and trough. If that water up there in the Gulf of Alaska doesn't change a whole lot, this could be your weather pattern for the next several months. Let's see if it changes at all. Here's September. Repositions a little bit. Do you see the little weakness right here though in between the two ridges? That's a good sign because that means that we might have a little bit of an active weather pattern coming in here during the month of September. So I'll take that. And I'm not terribly concerned about this right here being a big problem until we get deeper into the winter. If we shut things off and keep it dry for a longer period of time. So again, that little weakness is a good sign right there. This is October. Okay, again, ridge of high pressure up here, maybe some active weather over the northeast. And again, notice where the weakness is, right here. Underneath that ridge, not over the top of it, underneath it. So if this gets positioned a little farther north, we can have storm track sneak underneath this a little bit and help us out a little bit. So again, that's October. November, Big Ridge Gulf, active trough of low pressure right here. Think of this right here as a storm generator, if you will. Anomalously low pressure on the coast of California. That means we've got storms coming in from California and usually doing something like this, okay? Blocking ridge here, that would put a lot of this area here in a pretty favorable spot to see some moisture, if that indeed is the case, which we'll look at a little more closely here in just a moment. December. Again, that ridge is up here, positioned a little bit farther east, and look at this. Again, that weaker ridge, if you will, or a negated ridge here over the eastern two-thirds of the United States, which would argue for more active weather certainly than what they're going to be obviously having up here. But the thing that I am watching is the fact that this thing is real. The model sees it as being real, and without those ocean temperatures changing a whole lot in the Gulf of Alaska, this guy is likely going to be one of the major drivers in our long-range weather for the foreseeable future. And that's the ridge that I'm watching. That is the one key element that I have my eye on right now as far as the forecast goes. There it is again, persisting into January. Again, but the storm track is sneaking under it. Notice what we've got coming into California, which again, would be just fine with me if it did that. And February. What goes up must come down. That would obviously provide a lot of chilly air dropping straight south out of the guts of the Arctic and through Canada, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Again, that's the month of February, which for me in Colorado, our winters show up late, historically speaking. We have a lot of nice days in Colorado in January. Sunshine, 60 degrees, whatever. Well, I had 14 inches of snow in the city of Colorado Springs on May 21st this year. Yeah, did a real number on the trees. Yeah, it was a big pain. But I don't care, they're not my trees. So, as long as my family and the area farmers and ranchers have good moisture in the ground, good grass, good crops, I don't care if we lop off a few trees in the city, they'll just go and replant them anyway. So, we'll take the good with the bad a little bit there. But if you're looking for at least a little cooler than average stuff, this persistent ridge up here in the Gulf of Alaska would likely send some late season cold stuff farther south, which it's still okay in February up in my neck of the woods. You get into March and April and this pattern persists, you run the risk of freezing your winter wheat crop to the point where it's a real problem. And I doubt you folks like having temperatures that are chillier than you would like it in February down here either. But that is something that I would be concerned about with this pattern, is tapping some of that late season cold. So again, just walking you through February right here. So that's the upper level weather pattern. Let's see what the actual moisture, and see if it lines up with kind of what I was thinking, because if it does, that gives me more confidence going forward as far as what the forecast could actually mean. So this is August. Again, brown over Texas, big deal. It's supposed to be brown over Texas unless you get a hurricane. So we got that going. Wet right here, eastern Kansas. Like I said, they're going to have some flooding. Some dryness out here. Again, the monsoon just hasn't been able to get its act together this year due to some ocean temperatures that are less than favorable out here off the Baja. Arizona was about 3 or 4 weeks late with it, which basically means they missed out a month on their monsoon out there. They're getting a little bit better, but bottom line, nothing that's crazy right this moment. But certainly the northern plains, the upper Midwest, looks to have the most moisture with something like this for the rest of August. There's September. So remember how I was saying that weakness. Remember that weakness that I was showing you right here in the center part of the country? Well, model is picking up on that. So we've got some greens going on over Texas, Oklahoma, northward through Kansas, and a large part of the area. Out here in the east, not so much. But again, it just depends on what happens here close to shore. I'll be honest with you, with this whole hurricane thing this year, the Atlantic is shut off right now. So the prospects of something being long track coming across the Atlantic right now is less than favorable. So if you're looking for a good tropical storm or a hurricane, it's probably not going to come from the main development region out there in the Atlantic. It's likely going to be something that's homegrown, if you will, or develops close to shore out here, which again, model's not going to figure that out. It's just not. So is it possible we could have something? Yeah, sure. That might be what this is about right here. Off the coast of Texas, maybe we get something developed down here and then make its way north. We'll see what happens. Either way, I don't see a whole lot of brown over Texas for the month of September. So again, that leads me to think that this little flashy drought, if you will, or flashy dryness that's going on is simply just that, something that we should normally see this time of year. October, not a whole lot of badness going on here either. Got a lot of green over Texas, wetter than average the way the model sees it, extended to the upper Midwest. And again, remember what I said, the trend being your friend, it's in the same spot as we were in September. What's wet's wet, what's dry, somewhat stays dry. And we've got stuff coming in out here to California too, which I guess those people need it too. November, wetter than average. Most of the country, even out here in California, which is obviously a good sign. Nothing huge that's a problem in terms of dryness. December, again, wet pattern right through the nation's midsection. Little dryness out here in California, but again, nothing crazy. It's only a problem if it persists, because December cranks up their wet season out there. If we see that shut off, that could portend problems for us in the future, but the model doesn't show that happening. Remember that storm generator that we were talking about off the coast? They're helping to keep the storm track fairly active. Go January, we shut it off a little bit here, but that's okay. We've still got moisture around. California's still staying wet, going gangbusters in the Sierra here with what would be, feet upon feet of snow. And February. A little drier than average here, wet. But again, nothing that suggests that the storm track would be a complete failure or shut off here. So somewhat more good than bad here, I would certainly say, especially the fact that a large part of the state is doing okay with soil moisture at the present time. So if we can add to that in the fall, it gets through a little bit of a lean time here or there if we head through the winter. What we can't have is having March, which again, that's the next month here obviously. We can't have March looking big and ugly, like something like that. So that'll be something that I'm watching going forward too. But a lot of things here that I'm cautiously optimistic about, because I'm never positive, cautiously optimistic for sure, I think would be the way to go. It always is with weather, because I don't know anything, so there we go. My thoughts, mainly neutral to a weak Modoki El Nino. Then the Modoki El Nino, Modoki is the Japanese word for the same but different, meaning it's an El Nino, but the water is positioned differently out there in the Pacific, where you're having the warmer than average stuff more central Pacific versus off the west coast of South America. We have a little bit of that still remaining right now, but for the most part, we're kind of in the neutral here. And like I said, I'm always watching for that La Nina. Any little bit of tell that this may develop into a La Nina, I alert my clients very, very quickly on something like that. The majority of my clients are in the plains, and La Nina is rarely good for the plains. So any advance warning they can get on that is certainly beneficial. Any tropical storm hurricane action will likely develop close to home, as I said, but don't depend on that, because that's a real crapshoot. Flashy drought's a problem now for some. I don't see it becoming a big issue. I just don't. And at this time, long-term drought doesn't appear to be a significant concern either. Not only for the reasons that I've mentioned, but if you look at the way the region is made up right now, there's just nobody really suffering from long-term drought. And little pockets of dryness, okay, whatever. Something building regionally, that's the reason to become concerned. Don't see that happening right now. And that's a testament to the moisture you guys put in the ground in the spring and early summer too. So that's helping to keep things at bay. If you're interested in contacting me after this, please do. That's my email. Just email me anytime. I'm on Twitter. I talk to a lot of you guys on Twitter. And I do a lot of consulting, whether it's for ag customers or Department of Transportation. I'm doing some work for the Colorado Department of Environmentalists, which is a little bit of a new thing for me, because a lot of times we don't see eye to eye. But I'm trying to show them some things too that'll help them out to be more educated about weather, and this long range stuff is very important to them too. So if you want weather for your biz, just hit me up for a quote.